Our Twilight program today, the Rutland Mule Matter, is one that covers multiple generations. It is not unlike A Land Remembered in terms of family courage, grit, and hardship. I'm going to mention several things which Rick will be repeating, but it can be confusing. Othman and Irene Rutland family, 5 kids, came to Sanibel after the Great Freeze of 1894-95. They lost everything in Central Florida. In reduced circumstances, Othman was a laborer. He died not many years after they moved here. His wife, Irene, raised chickens to support the family and then married Henry Shanahan. He was the lighthouse keeper. They raised the family at the lighthouse. And Rick, I'm not stealing any of your things because some of these folks don't know this and will need to hear it again. In 1913, all of you know where She Sells Seashells and Huckster's Market are. Between those two, there is a welcome kiosk, and it has part of the story of the Rutland family there. There is also a memorial marker there right adjacent to the She Sells parking lot in his memory. In 1928, Clarence Rutland borrowed money from Francis Bailey to buy what we call the Rutland House, our building, which isn't open after Ian, but it's the cracker building that is on our property. Uncle Clarence and Aunt Ruth had a welcoming front porch. She sadly died in 1958. After he died in 84, 2 years later, that building was brought here to be the first one in the village. And now those are facts you need to lodge in your brain, and Rick will refer to them. Our speaker today is a Central Florida historian and author. His book, The Rutland Mule Matter, Revisited, solves questions about the background of our island's pioneer family, the Rutlands. Our organization's mission statement is to preserve, share, and celebrate Sanibel's history. We will be doing that today. Rick Cronin is the author of more than a dozen books since 2013. His primary area of research is 19th century, the last part of the 1800s, Central Florida history, and he is a frequent speaker on various topics. Born and raised in Ohio, he moved his young family to Central Florida in 1971, 2 months after Disney opened. At that time, our state's population was 7 million. Today, as we approach 24 million, his mission is to bring the remarkable stories of our state's pioneer settlers to a broader audience. With great pleasure, please join me in welcoming Richard Lee Cronin.
All right, well, thank you so very much. My name is Rick Cronin. I'm from Mount Dora area. I've spent, since 1971, as you heard, I've lived in Central Florida. I was a contractor for many, many years until 2008 came, and I said, that's it, I've had enough of contracting. I'm going to go do something else. So I decided to write research and write history because I loved Central Florida history so very much. What I'm going to be telling you tonight, you're going to probably be asking yourself, is that the truth? Is that the truth? Is he saying the truth? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you when I'm not telling you the truth. When I'm telling you the fiction part, I will tell you I made this up. Because this is really, what you're going to hear is truly a remarkable story. A story that until I discovered it, had not been told. So let me start, however, with Sanibel and work backwards a little bit because I want to give you a feel for what the Rutlands and Vicks families felt when they came to Sanibel in, as best we can determine, it was 1896. And I want to start with when Sanibel itself actually got created. It was established. What I use when I have nothing else to base my stuff on is when the post office opened, the very first post office opened. And that opened on July 31st of 1889. And you people already probably know all about Letitia LaFronde Ashmore Nutt. She came here with her 3 daughters, and between the 4 of them, they were the first teachers of the area. And in the year 1900, they were teaching for the children of 46 families. That was the population in the 1900 census of Sanibel. A little bit different than what it is today, as I'm sure you can imagine. There were 2 families in particular in the 1900 census that I became most interested in, and that was Rutland and Vic. They came here, as you just heard, around 1896. The reason they came here was because both families were doing fairly well in Central Florida growing oranges. Most families who had developed a citrus farm, they were quite well off and making good money. But when the freeze came, one individual described Central Florida in this way, that those who were living in Orange County in that area, they left their tables set, beds unmade, and went away. They had lost everything. Everything was invested in their citrus farms. When the first freeze hit in late December of 1894, it killed all the fruit. And now that had happened before, but what happened just 6 or 7 weeks later, on February 7th, a second and even worse freeze hit. By that time, the tree trunks were opening up and the sap was coming out of it. That freeze killed most of the trees, wiped out everything. Now, a lot of these people had 25, 30 acre citrus farms. 1,000, 2,000 trees was not unheard of. Trees that they were sending for a buck a bushel north. So they were making real good money. 2 individuals, as I said, lost everything. One was Ezekiel Vick. The other one was Othman Rutland. But he's not in this census. His wife is Irene. So by the year 1900, Othman, who brought his family here, had already passed. This Vick family lived here from about 1896 until about 1902, when they returned to Central Florida. Now, surprisingly enough, and very few people ever did this, Ezekiel actually replanted citrus trees when he got back to Orange County. He settled in Oakland, Florida. And he ended up doing very well a second time growing citrus. Became quite remarkable. Because Othman had passed, Irene, as you heard, remarried eventually, Henry Shanahan, and who ran the lighthouse here, and the Rutlands stayed here. So consequently, what you hear mostly about is the Rutlands. But I would like to introduce to you some very special guests, and throughout tonight I'm going to be talking about them at times, because when I was writing my book, the second time, I wrote it the first time around 2015. When 2025 came around, I had gathered so much information, more information, I decided I really needed to update this book. I needed to tell all the other information that really makes the story extra special. And one of the main characters I wrote about was Ezekiel C. Vick, this guy right here. So I'm sitting at my computer typing, and I'm writing about Ezekiel Vick, when at the bottom of my computer screen, I get these little flashes. You get an email, or you got a spam call coming, or whatever, and it says you got an email coming from Ezekiel Vick. Whoa, I'll tell you what now. Yeah, that was exactly how I felt. But I'd like you to meet Ezekiel Vick. Stand up, Ezekiel Vick. Ezekiel Vick. Ezekiel Vick is a third generation down from, well, I'll get into that. I've got it on the screen before I get too long. But Ezekiel wrote to me an email and said, I think you might have written a story about my family. And I said, after all the goosebumps disappeared, I closed out. I said, I am writing. I'm writing right now. I'm updating. So we started communicating quite a bit. And we really exchanged a lot of great information. Matter of fact, we met for the very first time here today, and I think we spent hours just sitting here earlier today talking about their family. Now, Ezekiel's just one individual, Heather Vick. Heather is Ezekiel's sister. And where's that? And Terry is the third Vick that we have. So Terry is a Floridian. These two left us. They up and left us. Ezekiel went to North Carolina, and Heather is all the way from Seattle, Washington, and she flew here just to be here with you all. And I should say, we have Ezekiel's wife, stand up, and Terry's husband, stand up. All right, so they are our special guest, and this really means a lot to me because since January 4th, on January 4th in Tavares, I met with a couple that were lineal descendants of Henry Overstreet. Who was he? He was the very first individual who opened a general market in downtown Orlando before Orlando even existed. And I thought, wow, this is really neat, and I spent several hours with him. This past Friday, I gave a talk in Winter Garden of descendants of Benjamin Franklin Whitner, who was one of the first surveyors in Orange County, and we spent quite a bit of time. So this is three families, three old-time pioneer families I've been able to get to just within the last 15 days that I've been able to talk to. So this is really a special event for me. As far as the Rutlands, we definitely need to get into there, but let me tell you about Ezekiel C. Vick. Ezekiel C. Vick married Sarah K. Rutland. So when Othman came here with the Vicks, he was coming down here with his sister and her family. The two of them had these family members, James Cecil Vick, Oscar Clarence Vick. Oscar became Oscar Sr. His son was born in Minnesota when he was in training to go overseas in World War I. His son, Oscar Clarence Vick Jr., is the father of our guests tonight. That's how they tie into this family tree. Helen Dewey Vick was born here in Sanibel Island. Born in 1898. She and her went back, of course, to Oakland with her family. Helen Dewey Vick became the very first female mayor in all of Orange County and is believed to be the first female mayor of a city in all of Florida. I have not been able to absolutely confirm that, but that is what the family legend says. Lillian Vick was also born in Sanibel Island and returned to Oakland, Florida. And Sadie Vick, the youngest, was born in Oakland after they went back. Oakland is near Winter Garden in Orange County. Sarah Catherine Rutland Vick was born in 1862 in a little homestead on the Wekiva River that probably most of us wouldn't want to have anything to do with today. That's how rugged it was, out in the absolute wilderness. She was, as far as I know, I believe, she was the youngest of the family. There's no record of any children after her. The couple, Ezekiel and Sarah, went back to Oakland, as I said, and they ended up spending their golden wedding anniversary in 1930. So this was a very close-knit family. And when they passed, they had spent for 30 years in Oakland, where he was a prominent in the citrus industry. An amazing accomplishment, as I said, considering he had lost everything. This man here took his family to Sanibel, not for tourist reasons, and they did not have a fancy hotel, but he came down here to pick vegetables while he rebuilt his life, as did Othman. Othman Rutland. There's a rock at Lake Eola in Orlando, Florida that says Orlando was named for this poor soldier who came down here and was killed by the Indians right here in Lake Eola, and his name was Orlando, blah, blah, blah. It turned out that rock is not true. You have a rock here that's not accurate as well. But that's not unusual in Florida history. It gets confusing. Othman Rutland, the father of Clarence Rutland, was not born in England. Sorry to tell you, if you're from England, he's not one of yours. He died in 1899. We think maybe 1898. There's really no accurate record what happened to Clarence. As you will find out in a little while, it's sort of like what happened, the mystery of what happened to his father. But Othman was a character or an individual who really brought me to Sanibel on a visit 10 years ago to try and find out more about this Rutland family who came from Orange County, because I was trying to trace the Rutland family and I wasn't able to. They disappeared. Well, it turned out they came down here. So Othman Rutland, we know he was here by 1897 because in the newspaper it said Mr. Othman Rutland has a small field of tomatoes, has enough for his family, so he's going to start shipping a few in 10 days. Tells us a little bit more about Othman. He lost everything just like Ezekiel, and he came down here and actually started growing vegetables, tomatoes in particular. So he too was starting over. Unfortunately, within a year or so of that date, Othman had died. And some might say it's Othman. We're going to get into Othman or other man in a little bit. So Othman Rutland was born in 1856 at Rutland's Ferry. Rutland's Ferry on the Wekiva River was the exact spot where Sarah was born. So as I said, Othman and Sarah were brother and sister. One of the things that now I brought my hair standing up again when I did come to Sanibel is I walked out. I came here. The Othman house, Rutland house, was open at that time, and I was able to tour the Rutland house at that time. And unfortunately, I know it's been damaged, and hopefully we're going to have it open back soon, are we? Maybe, yeah. Because this is a historic Florida house to me, not just a historic Sanibel. It's a historic Florida house. But I walked over to the cemetery. They told me I couldn't get there unless I walked. And sure enough, it was true. And I found this little cemetery, not much bigger than this room. And I thought, this is amazing. There was only one concrete marker, just one standing. And marker was Newton Rutland. Now, that wasn't his entire name. Newton was his middle name. The reason it sent chills up my body was because I was trying to find his grandfather. That's what brought me down here. I was hoping I could find some more information about his grandfather, because his grandfather was Isaac Newton Rutland. Poor old Isaac died when he was 23, I think. 23 years old. So here's the Rutland family. Othman Rutland married Irene Cook in what was Sumter County. Sumter County, the part of Sumter County they were married in, has since became Lake County in 1887. They had these children, Pearlie Mae Rutland, and she was born in West Apopka. West Apopka is on the west side of Lake Apopka. Apopka is on the east side of Lake Apopka. Apopka on the east side, the main town that everybody probably knows today, is where the family relatives of the Rutlands had settled. On the east side, two young men came over, Othman and his cousin, Miles Stewart. They came over across the river and they founded their own town of West Apopka. That's where they planted their citrus, right on the bank of Lake Apopka. They became rather successful. West Apopka soon had a train running through it. And there they had Pearlie Mae Rutland, who after she came here married Webster Shanahan. Sarah Catherine Rutland, who married a Paget right here at Sanibel. Clarence Othman Rutland, the gentleman who built the house that we see right over, or owned the house that we have right here. He married an Irene Wiles here at Sanibel. Isaac Newton Rutland was born in West Apopka, died here in Sanibel. And Marguerite Rutland, who married a Clarence Collins here at Sanibel. So they were one of the 46 earliest families of Sanibel. Very, very much a part of the Sanibel history. This is the cemetery I told you that raised hairs on my arms as I found it, because this one Woodsman, the Woodsman, Woodsman Insurance Company, they used to install and build these for their client if you were insured through them. Of this entire cemetery, it is the only upright permanent marker. Isaac Newton Rutland. Which brings us to the Rutland House and the Rutland Mule Matter. Because everybody says, what in the dickens does this have to do with the mule? Well, now it's going to get to the part where you're going to say, huh? What is he talking about? Well, I guess I should conclude. Irene married Henry Shanahan, who was a lighthouse keeper here for 25 years. They had a son between them, and he also had sons from a prior marriage. So now I come to the Rutland Mule Matter. The Rutland Mule Matter is something that I started this way. When I got into the history research and all, I felt I needed to read up about what was previously written. So a Professor William Fremont Blackman, he was the president of Rollins College. After he left the college, he sat and wrote a history of Orange County. In that history of Orange County, as I was reading through it, he said William W. Woodruff was a delegate at the secession convention in Tallahassee, one of two. And it went on to say who William married, his sons, what their sons did, and then it went on to another topic. And I said, okay, that's great. Who was the other guy? Well, that became a search that took me years to find out, and even more time to really discover what happened to that other delegate. I started searching every history that I could. There was no mention of the second delegate, only that there was a second delegate. Every county supposedly sent to Tallahassee 2 individuals. Those individuals voted on whether or not Florida should secede. So Orange County had 2 delegates who said, no, we don't want Florida to secede. One of them was William W. Woodruff. Who was the other? I started by going out, let's see, how did I do this? The best way to explain. I started going through the records of the actual secession convention because I couldn't find it anywhere else. So I did find where one section that says the 7 delegates who voted no were so-and-so, 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 Woodruff, and Rutland of the 19th Senatorial District. Well, tracing back to 1860, I found out Orange County was part of the 19th Senatorial District. So I found, all right, so Rutland, maybe I could find out if there was a Rutland in Orange County. And sure enough, I found out Isaac Newton Rutland, Isaac N. Rutland. He was a merchant and farmer in 1860. and he was married to a Margaret. And he had, in 1860, he had a daughter, Louisa. This guy here, which I eventually figured out by tracing back how they used to write S's back at that time, this guy was Cassius M. Rutland. This son here was Other Man. So he had a son, Cassius, and he had an other man, and then he had a nameless child that was 1 year old. The next door neighbor, the very next door neighbor, the homesteads next to him, was a Galloway, and with a daughter, NJ. NJ, Nancy, turned out to be Nancy Jane Galloway. Nancy Jane Galloway married William W. Woodruff that same year. Whoa, William W. Woodruff had gone to Tallahassee to vote no. Isaac N. Rutland, there was a Rutland of this 19th district. So that's how I started putting it together. And so Oathman, of course, was the Oathman, let me back up. There was one other child born to this family in 1862, and that was Sarah. So Sarah and Oathman, as you will find out, became two main characters in the Rutland Mule Matter. And the reason is this. In 1867, after the Civil War, they took a special census in Orange County. And in that census was a Mrs. I.N. Rutland, and she had children, 1, 2, 3, 4 children. And that became a little confusing. I thought, well, maybe that was nameless, but if it was nameless, how did Sarah figure in? Apparently this child here passed because Sarah was that 4th child. We know that. But by 1870, Mrs. is gone too. And there are 4 children. And those 4 children are in Georgia, living with their grandmother, the mother of Margaret. So this is where the story really started getting complex to me. What was going on that ended up this whole, why don't I find this in a history book? This should be somewhere in a history book, but it wasn't. I had to find all of this. By 1881, Oathman and Sarah Rutland were said to be the sole survivors of the estate of Isaac N. Rutland. That I dug out of old Orange County records that was not easy to find out. So this was a family that was torn apart by the Civil War, big time. Isaac's not there, his wife's not there. At least 3 children, maybe more, have disappeared, and only 2 are still around. And these 2 ended up coming here in 1896. So, who's William W. Woodruff? William W. Woodruff was that delegate, the first delegate that I told you. He's in the history books, so much so he's got his pictures. He's in there, and his wife, Nancy J. Galloway Woodruff. Nancy became known in the Sanford area as Nanny Woodruff, a character I loved to write about, so I did in the Rutland Mule Matter. William W. Woodruff in 1867, as I said, in 1860, as I said, married Miss Nancy Jane Galloway. They came to Florida with her father, she did, and lived at Rutland's Ferry. That is in the Woodruff biography of their family, is that she and her father settled at Woodlands Ferry. If you remember that 1867, she was right there next to Isaac and Rutland. So now I come to the more complicated part. What happened to Isaac? That's what my goal had to be. I wanted to know why we can't find Isaac and Rutland. So I need to point out that in in the 1860s, even after the Civil War was over, the provost marshals were the main people who controlled stuff in Central Florida. The Reconstruction period. They resolved land dispute items and whatever else there might be that had to be handled. You went to a provost marshal. So through a lot of digging and a lot of patience, I came across a file called the Rutland Mule Matter. The Rutland Mule Matter. So I didn't make up my title. I borrowed it from a used file. I'm going to pass this around because on the back, one side is this is a provost marshal's file that was made in 1864. It only came online around 2015 when I was researching this book and didn't really know yet what I had discovered. On the back side, you will see a handwritten letter that was in one of the letters that was in the Rutland Mule Matter file. So I'll start it here and you can pass it around as we talk. I think you'll find it interesting because this file has finally led me to try and figure out and find out what happened to Isaac and Rutland. And in one of these is this letter. Yeah, exactly what I thought. Exactly. This letter says that he is asking, or Mrs. Isaac N. Rutland is asking for her mule back. So the provost marshal started a file trying to find what happened to Mrs. Isaac N. Rutland's mule. Yeah, I thought this story's getting interesting now. This is enough to write a book about already, and I don't know if I'm halfway there yet. The letter, you will see as on the thing, the document that you're passing by, was signed by Lincoln. Not President Lincoln, Charles D. Lincoln, C.D. Lincoln of the Navy. He was one of the assigned provost marshals in the Sanford area. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, now we got a mule, we got the name Lincoln, this thing is getting wild. And I remember, I told you I will tell you when I make stuff up. I haven't said that yet. So this is all factual so far. So Mrs. Rutland wants her mule back. And that particular process started several different letters that were found in the file. There was only about 5 or 6 pieces of paper, not a whole lot, but they actually found the mule, and I'll get to that shortly. What I was trying to find out was, first of all, I had to verify that the Isaac N. Rutland that I had found was really the Isaac N. Rutland who went to the state of Florida's secession convention, and sure enough, in the opening minutes of the secession, I found 19th century senatorial district Isaac Newton Rutland. So the 19th century, so he represented, along with William W. Woodruff, the two neighbors, were the two individuals who went to Tallahassee. So I had verified now that Isaac N. Rutland was the Rutland of the 19th senatorial district. These were the two individuals who voted no. After doing a lot of research, these two individuals you have to have an enormous amount of respect for. In researching the convention, which in part 2 of Rutland Revisited, one of the reasons I updated it and I added certain parts to it is I go into what was the atmosphere in Tallahassee in 1861. Well, it was crazy. Most of the individuals there wanted secession, and they were firing guns in the street, shooting in the air, screaming. The galleys were filled with women and men shouting and yelling secession. So there were 69 delegates on the floor. When it came time to vote on the January 10th, every time somebody said yes, it went crazy, yelling and screaming. Everybody was thrilled. Outside, they were shooting off guns. Another yes. 7 individuals among 69 in that crowd had the courage to stand by their principle and say no. Now, can you imagine how those people in the galleys and outside reacted when they heard a no? I don't think they were the most friendly individuals. Isaac and William both voted no. And yet, William's outcome was very different than Isaac's, because William stayed around. He made it into history books, and he even went back into politics in the Orange County area. Isaac vanished. What was with that? There's a picture of Isaac Newton Rutland. This was the individual. This was all 69 delegates. And this one, as you can see, is Isaac Newton Rutland. So somebody told me, hey, you can find this out very easily. Go to the people of lawmaking in Florida and look it up, because you'll be able to find out, you'll be able to see him in there if he really was. So I went, this is it. There's William W. Woodruff. The House of Representatives updates this every 2 years. So every lawmaker since 1822 up to 2015 is in this book. There's William W. Woodruff, sure enough, Secession Convention. There's Robert Rust, R.W. Rutland, John Rawls. Not in there. What was with that? So I decided I had to plead the case for Isaac N. Rutland. I sat down and I wrote this letter to the House of Representatives. And I said, I just want to point out a mistake that you make in your roster. And I said, you're missing Isaac N. Rutland. He's not in your book. And I gave him some facts in as best I could. And I sent him that letter. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I got basically thanks but no thanks. Our records indicate that he was not a member of the District 19 senatorial district. It was James D. Stark and Robert W. Roper, the next one. Isaac was not a member of the 19th senatorial district. Oh man, this was getting so complicated for me. So I went back and I thought I needed to research everything all over again. So I went back and I found out that Rutland not only voted no to secession, out of the 69, about 42 or 45, somewhere around there, stayed in Tallahassee and wrote the new Constitution for the state of the new Florida that was no longer part of the United States. And that Constitution was signed by Rutland. So I had to start doing a little bit more researching, and I found out that in 1860, when they elected the senators from each district, they met that November. Now, we didn't secede until January 1861, but in November of 1860, the Senate met. Not all of them showed up, but of those who did show up, including James Douglas Stark here, they voted this way. We have decided that we will go by whatever decision the delegates of the Constitution of the Secession Convention decide to do. We'll be fine with it. We don't want to have anything to do with it. So that's when I wrote back to him and I said, let me clarify a few things. Number one, the senatorial district, the entire Senate, abdicated their authority. They put themselves out of the job. They said, whatever these delegates decide, we're fine with. And then those new delegates wrote a whole new constitution. Stark lost his job just because the delegates eliminated him. that's when they wrote back and said, all right, well, on second thought, I'm going to take a break here. On second thought, we're going to add him to our new book that comes out in 2017. So I beat City Hall. I fought him and I beat him. But I'm going to take a 1 second break here, and I just want to promote that I do have a lot of other books, and one of them that fits your area quite nicely, I think, is Historic Florida Towns and Places. Now, I really hope that you'll go by the Rutland Mule Matter. I worked out with the Historical Society here that they benefit from the proceeds of the purchase of that book, and so I'm not selling it here, but you can buy it in their gift shop as soon as you rush out of here. I think they have somebody anxiously waiting. I do have some books if you're interested in looking over them. I gave you a list of them, but Historic Florida Towns I'm particularly proud of. This is my brand new book because I've listed 625 Florida towns, large and small, tell you how they got established, how they got named, who named them, who founded them, and in the back of it is an index of 1,704 Florida pioneers. I was mentioning earlier, Lake Wales is one of the towns in these books. You know, Lake Wales is spelled wrong. The lake is spelled right, but the Lake Wales city is spelled wrong. And that's easily shown by just visiting go out to Lake Wales to the lake. There's a sign that says, "Welcome to Lake Wales, W-A-I-L-E-S." And who is it owned by? The city of Lake Wales, W-A-L-E-S. There's a lot of mystery and a lot of fascinating things about Florida. And it's a history of this state is something I love, and I do hope you at least take a look at it. So coming back to what I was talking about. So I started out originally with the Rutland Mule Matter, an ugly cover, I know. I never did like the cover, but as soon as I published it, people started talking to me about it. So I thought, well, I need a better cover, so I updated it. And then 10 years later, last year, 2025, I came out with Rutland Mule Matter Revisited. So we're back to this letter. We have decided to include. Rutland wasn't the only individual. I had actually found, I think, 18 individuals that they did not have listed. And all 18 of those individuals, as you can see by this, if you look at the people of lawmaking 1822 to 2017, Isaac N. Rutland is now part of the history of Florida. And it was quite a journey to get there. Again, telling my story, the Rutland Mule Matter, I found it fascinating that there was actually a folder in Washington, D.C. in a basement somewhere that has that. So what did the mule look like? You know, our Navy, I guess, had a little time on their hands after the war because the said mule is about 10 years old, gray color, medium size, marked of saddle and harness upon him, the poor old Rutland mule. Well, where did they find him? He was in the Jacksonville quartermaster's barn. So what did they do with Rutland Mule? Well, as I told you, I haven't lied. I haven't given you to fiction yet. They put Rutland Mule on a barge. They shipped him down the St. Johns River, which is usually about a day's and a half's ride. They usually have to stay overnight back in the 1860s, halfway. They shipped him all the way from Jacksonville to where Sanford, Florida is. Took him off that mule, or off of that steamboat, and they took him all the way to Apopka. Delivered him to Mrs. Isaac N. Rutland in Apopka, where she was living on the property of her sister and brother-in-law, the Stewarts. The Stewarts, Matthew Stewart and Cinderella Stewart, hey, I'm still not making this stuff up. Matthew and Cinderella Stewart were Confederates. They had lost several of his brothers and family members in the Civil War. And yet their daughter was married to Isaac N. Rutland. Not really a happy occasion when you find out as we continue on. as I said, he signed Florida's Ordinance of Secession, and there's his name, Isaac N. Rutland, clear as bell, but we wrote him out of history. Why in the dickens? Here's where he wrote and signed. His name appears as the author of the new state constitution in 1885. In my book, the hair is about ready to come up again. So in my book, I wanted Nancy Galloway Woodruff a character. You see, I decided I wanted to write this, but people had to know about Isaac. But they probably wouldn't read just a history book. I had to make it a historical fiction. And that's where the fiction comes into it. But there are certain things, it's loaded with facts, but you're going to have to dig them all out. Nancy's husband Woodruff, she was much younger, so he died, and she remarried a gentleman by the name of Charles H. Beck. I didn't make this stuff up, folks. Charles H. Beck also lost everything in the Great Freeze in 1894-95, and he decided he had to figure out a way to save his family and how to rescue them. So what did he do? He went to Alaska to dig gold. And in the great Easter Sunday avalanche of Alaska, he was buried alive.
Really? Is that true?
That is true. I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to, I'll tell you when I start making stuff up. So, the Florida House, you know what the Florida House is? Oh, folks. You know what the Florida House is. The Florida House is the only state embassy in Washington, D.C. Only state embassy in Washington, D.C. And it's a block from the Capitol. And I get to, on April 28th, I get to give a talk there about the great, and it's called Florida, D.C. It's about all the people in Washington that came down here and had a lot to do with Florida. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. But they asked me, the Central Florida chapter had asked me a couple years back to do a talk. And so I had to talk on the Rutland Mule Matter. And this gentleman here comes in, and his name is Chuck Beck. Chuck is what I called my character in the book. And he says, yeah, I'm a descendant of Charles Beck. And this is a picture of him. So this picture, he brought me this picture. Chuck Beck is on the Historical Society of the United States House of Representatives. And so he's been he really has since been good friends and has contributed quite a bit. So again, it's factual when you read the book. So we're getting close to the end here, I think, but in May of 1864, going back to Isaac N. Rutland, May of 1864, the Union forces decide they're going to do something tricky. They're going to sneak in some of the Loyalists to Jacksonville, Florida. So they set up a meeting in a Baptist church in Jacksonville, Florida, and they snuck these individuals in during the night. And one of the individuals there was Isaac N. Rutland of Orange County. This is directly out of the newspaper of May 18. Formerly a member of the state Senate and a delegate to the secession convention of 1861. He was nominated to be a delegate to be sent to Maryland and vote to get Florida back in the Union. That's what they were going to do. They were going to have these people, ship them up to Maryland for a convention, and they were going to re-vote to have Florida re-entered. Of course, nobody down here knew about that. That was just a sneaky plan they thought sounded like a good idea. But he said, Isaac said, no, I am not leaving. Emphatically declared, I would not leave the state until he has assisted in driving the very last rebel from Orange County. May 1864. Gainesville, Florida, August 17th, 1864. This fellow here, Colonel Harris, Ohio 75th Anniversary Infantry, you read about him in my Rutland Mule. He later he was from Ohio, as I said. He went back to Ohio and he got into politics. So by the early mid-1880s, I think, he was running for governor and House of Representative and so forth. But in 1864, he had his men kind of like on furlough. They were resting in Gainesville when a bunch of rebels came in and really embarrassed the Union. It was one of only 2 or 3 battles in Florida, and this one did not go well for the Union. But if you go, this appeared in, I believe it was a Georgia or Alabama newspaper, because you won't find it anywhere in Florida. But on August 17th, they took a lot of prisoners. And among the killed on the side of the robbers was the noted traitor, Captain I.N. Rutland, who was a member of our state convention. He refused to surrender, and our men gave him an indefinite furlough. It was a bad time, and it was not one of our better memories. But I will tell you this, I still have not, and I will not tell you the remarkable surprise at the end of the book, because I haven't disclosed that, and that too is factual. What I did make up in the book was how I told the story. I wrestled with telling, how do I tell this story? How do I tell this story that people would really get the impact of what happened here in the state of Florida and with Isaac Newton, Rutland? So I decided I needed to tell it in a diary. So I told it in the form of a diary that was written by Othman Rutland. And he told of how he and his brother-in-law, Ezekiel Vick, went step by step trying to find clues to what happened to the father. Remember, Othman was very young when his father was killed and disappeared and vanished from their lives, and only a couple years older when his mother disappeared and they shipped him off. So I decided to tell it through a diary, and the diary is made up. But everything they encounter, the people they encountered, including General Finnegan, who was the Florida general, all of that is factual. As best as I could create and work into the subject, how Othman and Ezekiel worked their way through and go to Ohio and meet with Representative Harris and end up going to Washington, D.C. to meet with the pension office that maintains records, and the frustrations that they carry in trying to find Isaac and Rutland. And then I end with a surprise that I'm sorry, I just cannot disclose. I can't do it. I can't do it. But if you find somebody who read the book, they might tell you. I think, though, they would say, no, you got to read the book. I will be happy to answer any questions except for what the ending is, if you have any. And I'm sure you probably have plenty. Thank you.